Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. Amidst a massive standoff currently between the government and opposition in Parliament and a suspension spree that is still ongoing, the Lok Sabha today passed the CEC and EC Bill 2023. This bill seeks to regulate the appointment, the conditions of service and term of office of the Chief Election Commissioner and other election commissioners. Now, this bill was earlier passed in the Rajya Sabha on December 12. Opposition has been criticizing this bill as unconstitutional and an attempt to circumvent the Supreme Court judgment, which had included the Chief Justice of India in the CEC selection panel. The government's version of that panel replaces the CJI with a union minister. The government has maintained that there is clear separation of powers in Indian constitution and hence the CJI has been replaced as the judiciary cannot interfere in executive matters. They also point out that the Supreme Court judgment itself was valid only till Parliament passed a new law. It is also worth noting that earlier, before the Supreme Court verdict, there was no provision or guideline in the Constitution of India which highlighted the process to appoint election commissioners. Previous governments themselves used to make these appointments, and that has been the norm. But with this bill finally passing in both houses, will the neutrality of the Election Commission be questioned, as it has been in the past, especially when this bill was brought in Rajya Sabha? And would that be the right and fair criticism to make? We'll take that question to our guests in just a bit. But let me first bring to you what really has happened as far as this bill is concerned. So today, of course, the Lok Sabha passed the CEC and EC bill after a brief discussion, as most of the opposition MPs were suspended by the Speaker for the unruly behaviour. This bill was tabled in the upper house of the Parliament, remember, earlier on December 10 and passed on December 12. This bill will now replace the EC Act of 1991. The opposition says that this bill is against the Constitution, against the spirit of the Constitution, while Union Law Minister Arjun Ram Meghwal has said that this bill will make the process more transparent than it was. So what are the key pointers of this bill? First of all, it deals with the appointment and conditions of service of the CEC and EC, as I said. It also deals with their salaries, pension and terms of office. The bill has a provision or provisions regarding requirements and qualifications as well. It also establishes a search panel which will make a list of candidates, and the selection panel will then give the recommendations on the basis of the list provided to them to the President of India. The President of India then appoints the CECs and ECs. So the major difference really in both the search panel and the selection panels. Now, let's take a look at the differences that are there in the selection panel, which is the major bone of contention. So as the Supreme Court had suggested earlier in March this year, the selection panel was supposed to be comprised of the Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition and the Chief Justice of India. This was a major issue that was debated even at that time, if that is the right thing to do, from the Supreme Court also. But what does the bill say now? Now that it has been passed from both houses, it has effectively been adopted, will be given an assent to become an act. The Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition stays, so there is a divergent point of view, but there will be a Union Cabinet Minister nominated by the Prime Minister that will be part of this selection panel, and that's really the major bone of contention. So the question we ask is this: on the basis of just this, will it be right to question the Election Commission's neutrality? This question becomes extremely important because we are of course gearing up in less than 5 months' time for the next general elections.
सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर जो आर्टिकल 50 में है, संविधान में लिखा हुआ है, उसके तहत लिखा है कि इस बिल को सर्वसम्मति से पास करें। ये बहुत प्रोग्रेसिव लॉ है।
पहली चीज तो यह है कि ये बिल नहीं है, ये बिलडोजर है, तो इस कानून को सुप्रीम कोर्ट में चुनौती भी देंगे।
The government is not ready to heed to the voice of the opposition.
Hello, Moto.
Let's go across to our guest joining us. Dolly Sharma is the Congress spokesperson joining us on the show. I'll also be joined shortly with the BJP spokesperson Sidharth Yadav. But first, I want to go across to Dolly Sharma. Dolly, I want to take the I want to go across first to Sumit Chander, actually, advocate joining us. Sumit Chander, there has been a lot of legalities and legalese that have been discussed as far as this bill is concerned. For the benefit of our viewers, would you just put it into context? Is it wrong of the executive, the parliament in this case, to decide who should be in the selection panel for the CEC?
See, for that, you need to understand the background as to what it was. Now, it all starts with the Constitution of India, Article 324, Sub-Article 2. And it's clearly stated there that the appointment of the Chief Election Commissioner and other election commissioners shall be made by the President. So that the Constitution provides, it cannot be challenged at all. In Anup Barnwal case, which the judgment was passed by a 5-judges bench in March 2023 on a PIL, Supreme Court held that there is a need for the Election Commission of India and CEC to be independent and fair. And that there should be a committee for appointment of CEC and ECI, which are comprised of the Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition and the Chief Justice of India. They said these three categories of people basically to say that it is extremely important that the Election Commission of India and the Chief Election Commissioner function very independently, as it is an important part of democracy. But keep in mind, in the same judgment, the Supreme Court also clarified that this committee shall function only till the Parliament drafts an alternative.
Yes.
End of the democracy is by the people, so the Parliament has to take the final call on this.
No, that I did mention, but the question that is being raised is whether the government of the day is right or wrong in removing the CGI. Was the CGI ever supposed to play a role in the selection of the CEC?
See, there are the three pillars of the Constitution: the judiciary, the executive and the legislature. So Supreme Court, in all fairness, felt that all the three pillars, one representative from the three pillars of the Constitution should be made part of this. But new bill, Section 7, it says that the Election Commissioner shall be appointed, of course, by the President, as the Constitution says, but it shall now be done on the recommendation of a selection committee, as Supreme Court had said, should be comprising of 3 people. That should include, of course, the Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition, so we have the other side, and a Union Minister to be appointed by the Prime Minister. Keep in mind that democracy, when it is to be taken care of, the independence is done by 3 totally independent bodies. Supreme Court's judgment, leaving it to the Parliament making the law and sticking to the fact that 3 different independent members should be done, has been taken care of under the Act. What needs to be seen is that the third, which is the most important, is the Union Cabinet Minister to be nominated by the Prime Minister would turn out to be an absolute independent member to have a say in all the 3 aspects of judiciary, the executive and the legislature. That independence needs to be checked on. And if
obviously the union minister is bound to agree with the view of the government of the day, and I'm talking about the selection panel, the search panel, coming up with a list of 5 individuals and then giving it to the selection panel. So, you could argue that it's going to be 2 versus 1, which is possibly what was sought to be eliminated. But you could also argue that putting the CGI was wrong because the judiciary is not supposed to play a role in what is effectively an executive matter, which is what the government's argument is. And the CGI was never meant to be on this panel. So I want to go across quickly to the Congress representative. Dolly Sharma is also joining us. Dolly, in the past, the Congress has very vehemently criticized this bill when it was passed in Rajya Sabha and now as well. What is the way forward for the Congress party as far as this bill is concerned? Because we've heard some murmurs from the opposition that they would like to challenge this in the Supreme Court, for example.
Yeah, this bill is totally unconstitutional and anti-people. This is very clear because putting up, removing the CJI from the committee and playing with their own cabinet minister itself is setting dangerous precedent because...
But there is no precedent in this case. Dolly, the problem is exactly this. There was no precedent in this case.
No, that's what I'm saying. That it itself is stating that, of course, because of the cabinet minister will go with the government and removing the CJI is giving a dangerous sign to the constitution, to this nation, to the democracy? Why do they want to do this? This is a clear, as I said, unconstitutional message that has, today gone to the entire nation. What is the need? Do they want to create an, fascism जैसा चल रहा है यहाँ पे? यहाँ हिटलर शाही पूरी ये चलाना चाहते हैं, तानाशाही पूरी चली रही है देश में, and by removing the CJI is giving the message to the entire nation कि yes, अब हम लोकतंत्र में नहीं है और नहीं रहेंगे, क्योंकि जिस तरीके की of course we are going to challenge this. Challenge this to the Supreme Court. We will move to the Supreme Court because this is totally the murder of democracy that we see today.
Can I just ask you as a follow-up, the Supreme Court judgment in itself said that this panel that they are envisaging with the CJI in it was to be functioning only till the government brings in a law or the parliament passes a law. So on what grounds will you challenge it again in the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court gave away to the government to bring this bill.
No, but putting up a CJI is always good when it comes to, the democracy. You cannot think of a cabinet minister taking a decision against the government. Of course, the minister will go with the government.
Yes,
that's
clear. Precisely the point the government is making. I want to go across to Sidharth Yadav of the BJP also joining us, but I do want to explain this for our viewers beyond party lines. When the CECs were being appointed in India since independence, they were being done purely at the behest of the executive. There was no role of the judiciary. So it's not like there was a role of the judiciary which has been eliminated now. The role of the CJI was brought in only via this Supreme Court judgment. Before that, it was the government of the day, the executive of the day that was deciding who the CEC should be. So if no heavens fell then, what heavens have fallen down now is the question that will arise. And the government has been very categorical in saying that there is a separation of power in our constitution. The judiciary is not meant to interfere in matters which are in the executive's domain. But on that, I want to bring in Sidharth Yadav as well. There are doubts emerging. And we are marching towards the 2024 general elections, big elections to take place in the country. And clearly the opposition is raising doubts on the neutrality of the Election Commission. That by eliminating the CJI, the government wants to remote control the Election Commission itself. How do you respond to that?
Shivani, first of all, I think whenever any of my friends from Congress come out and say that the democracy is in danger or the constitution is in danger, they should actually go back and see the conduct of their MPs, what they do on the stairs of the temple of democracy, and how they do for the second highest constitutional position of our country. Some Atmanthan there can probably, make the picture clearer. But I have to speak on this bill today. Definitely the provision laid down by the Supreme Court was only a temporary one. And the Supreme Court made it very clear that the setup is only going to be up till the government makes a law. If we have to look at any change, I think the change is that the voice of opposition has been added to the setup wherein the Chief Election Commissioner will be now appointed. It was always never in the Congress rule, never in the history when they ruled the country. They even never cared about how the CEC is being appointed. They thought so, they appointed one, and no problems happened according to them. But now today, when finally a bill has been there, a committee will be formed, a panel will be there, and entire procedure has been laid down to select the Chief Election Commissioner. I think it's very unjust on the part of the entire opposition, especially on Congress, that they want to blow something out of proportion.
Okay,
and I'm really shocked that my friend from Congress was saying that it is anti-people. The people's Lok Sabha, the people's Rajya Sabha is deciding this. The people's representatives are voting for a bill that the people, it cannot be anti-people. There is a setup in our constitution. That setup has to be followed. The executive, the separation of power has to be followed. The executive, ma'am, I was not speaking in between of you. If you want to speak, please go ahead. I'll not speak. Dolly ji, I was not speaking in between of you. Please have the courtesy to hear me out. Dolly ji, please have the courtesy to hear
Sidharth,
me out.
I just want to quickly come in.
Shivani, are you saying something?
Yes, very quickly finish. I'll give you 10 seconds.
Sure.
I want to come in after that, please.
Yeah, so there is a very clear separation of power in our constitution. That separation of power gives the absolute right to the legislature, to the executive, to lay out any law for any such appointment. There can be no overpowering, there can be no crossing the line between the wings of our democracy.
Okay.
And
In
that
fact,
is what has
that
been
is
followed
what
in
is
this bill.
enshrined in the
opposition has a
Constitution.
say
I'll go to the lawyer in just a bit on that, but I do want to point out, Dolly, I'm coming to you. Even the Supreme Court in its then judgment in March had said that, you know, the founding fathers had contemplated a law on the selection or the appointment of the CECs by Parliament. 7 decades have passed and political dispensations of all hues, which includes almost 60 years of Congress party, have not introduced a law. No, so they've talked about how the politicians have not taken a cue. Clearly, for all of these decades that Congress was in power, you didn't bring in a law, you certainly did not include the judiciary. If democracy was not under danger then, can you explain to our viewers, how will you explain to them that democracy is in danger now that there's a different government, but it wasn't in danger then when the Congress governments were electing the CECs, those CECs were neutral, then the election commission was completely neutral?
Don't you think it's a 2:1 dominance of the committee?
What was the committee earlier under Congress?
No, it's the Prime Minister, one cabinet minister, and the leader of opposition who's not allowed to speak in the parliament. His mic they switch off, and the opposition parliament members are also thrown out of the parliament. Here Sidharth Yadav is speaking hell lot of things about what the Modi government is doing. Clearly, people can see today that nobody can speak about the unemployment today in the parliament. We cannot speak about the farmers.
Dolly, I'll come to the parliament disruptions. I'll come to the parliament disruptions.
Now 2:1 dominance.
Dolly, one second. You're not answering my question. I'll come to the parliament disruptions in just a bit. But you didn't answer my question. When for 60 years Congress governments were electing the CEC without a CJI or the judiciary on the panel, how is it that those election commissions were neutral, but today it is not neutral? What is the difference?
So, I am clearly saying that if appointing a CJI makes the committee fair, why not this government is doing?
So why didn't Congress governments do that for 60 years?
We always did a free and fair elections.
How? But you know, this is what I'm saying. You're being partisan in your argument that elections were free and fair when you were in power, even though the CGI was not part of this panel. But elections will not be free and fair.
I have already told you 2:1 the ratio.
So what was the ratio in the Congress parties? What was the ratio? Was the CGI there?
With the CGI there, we have always done the free and fair elections. Clearly, now you see when the parliament members are not allowed to speak in the parliament.
I'll come to the parliament disruptions in just a bit, but I am discussing the CEC bill and the merits of the CEC bill, and particularly the allegations that the election commission is not going to be neutral now. One second, one by one, Dolly, one by one, parliament disruptions I have discussed for the last 1 week. I will also bring that issue in, but please allow me to conduct this. My point is that you're going to go to the public and suddenly say this election commission is not neutral, which is an independent body, envisaged under the constitution. It will shake the belief of the public in the largest electoral exercise that is conducted anywhere in the world. If elections were free and fair by the same EC mechanism under Congress governments, the credit goes to the election commission. And if the election commission, if the elections are going to be fair today, the credit should go to the election commission, not to the governments of the day. But my fundamental question has not been answered. How were election commissions neutral when there was no CGI on the panel for 70 years, but they don't remain neutral now? That question is the most fundamental question, Sidharth Yadav.
Absolutely, Shivani. I think, it is, you asked the question, but there is no answer to this question, because I think it has become a fashion for the Congress and the entire opposition to just try and make a narrative and build a propaganda that this is happening, that is happening, while in their rule, it was even worse. And I do not, hesitate saying that, because today at least the entire procedure is laid down. We have a panel, a committee. The Supreme Court has also asked the government, rather, to make a law on this. And for that, they made an interim provision, which was being followed. But now the government has come up with a new law.
But can I ask
think
you?
for
Can
the
I
people
ask
of
you?
the country,
But can
we
I also
should-
ask you? The Supreme. You may say that there is a separation power and all, but the Supreme Court in its judgment also said that there is a need to insulate the functioning of the ECs from the executive interference. The party in power will have insatiable quest to remain in power. Just because it flew under Congress rule doesn't mean it becomes kosher under you too. Do you not believe that there could be greater transparency?
Absolutely, Shivani. I think what the Supreme Court has said is a very general statement. We have seen for 60 years that the party always had a quest to remain in power, always, and that would be true for any party. We are governing this country today. We are not going to be there forever. We are making a law for the betterment of this country. The transparency absolutely should be there, and for that, the provisions of removal of the CEC, the provisions or appointment of the CEC are being laid out. But when I say that the opposition voice, the LOP, is also part of the panel, and now with that say, the CEC is going to be appointed, and the procedure is going to be more transparent to the constitutionally elected leader of the opposition. I think that is how the country should run. In a legislature and executive function, we cannot just include judiciary by assuming the fact that any inclusion of judiciary in any matter of this country would bring in transparency.
I think you make a fair point. I think you make a fair point. I think we need to be mature enough to be able to discuss these issues. With all due respect to the judiciary, there is a separation of power. In recent times, there's been judicial activism or excessism being discussed, not just in India, but in many countries. And whether just adding judiciary means that the process automatically becomes absolutely fair and above board is also a fundamental question to ask. But on the separation of powers, I want to go across to Sumit Chander one more time. The court also said that ordinarily the court cannot usurp what is purely a legislative power or function. But where there exists a gap or a vacuum, the court may not shy away from its judicial function. Do you think it's fair for the court to step in and appoint itself as one of the custodians of an appointment when the Constitution doesn't give it that power?
The Supreme Court was only trying to fill up a vacuum which existed till then. And at that stage, to create an independent body altogether, the reliance has to be on the three pillars of the Constitution. So the legislature, the executive, and the
Judiciary.
they were made the part. Now, in the Supreme Court also felt that in order to ensure the purity of the election process, it has always been thought by our constitution makers that the responsibility to hold free and fair elections in the country should be entrusted to an absolute independent body. Now, there is, for this purpose, there is a section 6 which everybody has been ignoring. Section 6 of the new bill also says that there will be a search committee which will be headed by the cabinet secretary. So executive comes into the picture, and 2 members not below the rank of the secretary to the government of India will prepare a panel of 5 persons for the consideration by this committee. So this committee is also restricted to the 5 persons which will be brought up by the cabinet secretary and 2 of its members. So those things will be taken into consideration, and if anybody feels that this itself is still not creating an independent body, then you are always open to go back to the Supreme Court.
In fact, I was going to ask you exactly that question. The opposition has suggested, Dolly Sharma has also suggested that they wish to take this to the Supreme Court, challenge this bill because it is coming after the Supreme Court judgment, even though that judgment gave the leeway to the government or to bring a bill and for the parliament to pass a law, and they did not put any riders on what that selection committee by the in the bill should be. So they gave that leeway to the government. But do you think the Supreme Court can adjudicate again whether this bill is constitutional or not? Can it be taken to the Supreme Court on a constitutionality test?
Anywhere where the Supreme Court feels that yes, somewhere some provision of the Constitution has been hindered, or we are going beyond the structure of the Constitution. Like in this case, the provision arises or the need arises from Article 324 of the Constitution, which says that the appointment of the Chief Election Commissioners shall be made by the President. So now, if the Supreme Court feels that the independence, which was the basic requirement of this body of the Chief Election Commissioner, is not taken care of, then yes, Supreme Court can intervene and strike down this provision as unconstitutional. Or
you don't feel, Sumit, you don't feel that there will be criticisms of judicial excessism here? Excessism?
my feelings at this stage will not make much of a difference, because end of the day, it's a 5 judges bench which passed a judgment. And tomorrow, again, if it is challenged, they are going to consider. But yes, what needs to be ensured is the independence of the
Election
body.
Commission, yes. Okay,
Yes.
I want to go across to Sidharth Yadav now. Sidharth, we've seen what has transpired over the last 1 week or so. Nearly 150 of opposition MPs have been suspended, predominantly from the Lok Sabha. You know, this bill was brought in Rajya Sabha earlier, then brought in and passed in Lok Sabha. There's not even a great debate that has taken place. Now, is that the way you want to pass quote-unquote contentious bills? Shouldn't the opposition at least be heard? And wouldn't that be your responsibility, so that when the bill does pass, then there are no doubts left, then nobody can say we weren't heard?
Shivani, but who is to blame? I think we should ask that question first. The day when the opposition was making a ruckus in the parliament, that day also had very important bills. We had the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam bill, we had the J&K reservation bill in Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. But the opposition is not believing in participating in any debate, discourse, discussion. That is not the choice of opposition. If the opposition is resorting to gundagardi in the parliament and they just want to take it as a hostage and ensure that no bill for the people's welfare should be discussed and passed there, I think for the welfare of the people of this country, it must be ensured that no such intention should be given any leverage at any spot. The parliament is to discuss for the welfare of the people of this country, the poor, the backward, the women, the youth. And for that discussion, the opposition also has to participate in a constructive manner. But you have to come out in the well-played placards and do any sort of ruckus.
Can I take that to Dolly? Now, Dolly, I'll point out. One second, Dolly, let me ask the question. Dolly, let me ask the question. You know, here is where a fundamental point needs to be established. Since December 13, when that intrusion took place, from the next day, the opposition was demanding a statement from the Home Minister. I don't want to get into the merit of what the standoff is for, but subsequently the suspensions happened. Incidentally, this bill, the CEC bill, was brought in Rajya Sabha on December 12th, a day before that intrusion and a day before this standoff, 2 days before this standoff began. But do you know what happened in Rajya Sabha on December 12th? When this bill was tabled, the opposition walked out. This bill was passed after an opposition walkout. Now, with what face is the opposition going to say that you are not being allowed to participate when you walk out when the bills are presented?
See, it's very clear. We don't walk out. Do you think they allow us to speak? They switch off the mic. And whenever the opposition, any member of parliament speaks in the parliament, everybody from the other side starts shouting. You have seen the way they shouted at Mallikarjun Kharge. What do you think they want to establish here? We've seen how they brought the farmers' law, and how did they discuss?
But why did the opposition walk out? It doesn't serve your purpose if you don't get yourself heard. In Rajya Sabha, for example, you could have participated in the discussion. You could have laid your points down.
We are laying our point, but compromising with the security of parliament. Do you think it is good?
I'm talking about December 12th. This is precisely why I mentioned the date. The day this bill was tabled in Rajya Sabha and passed in Rajya Sabha was December 12th. This whole issue of the parliament intrusion hadn't even arisen.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Ki whenever we try and participate, what do you think they do? They switch off the mics. The other side starts shouting. They doesn't allow you to speak. They doesn't allow to speak.
In a discussion for a bill, which is slated, there is designated time given to all sides. I have not heard of any instances of mics being put off at that time. That may be when there are interruptions made. But I'm almost at the end of this. I just want to ask one more time to Dolly Sharma that do you believe that this could become one of the big issues that the Congress and the opposition parties could raise? Because I emphasize a big election in 2024 is coming up, and would it be right to continue to question the neutrality of the Election Commission?
Yes, I think if you're getting this law 2014 के आप टाइम पर आप पावर में आए और उसके बाद तो आप लाए नहीं कोई बिल, और अगर आप अब लाए हैं तो why is the ratio 2:1? Why not the CJI? अगर आप लॉ ला रहे हैं तो CJI को रखिए, एक ऑपोजिशन लीडर को रखिए, पार्लियामेंट को रखिए. Why the ratio is not? Why is the ratio?
Why should it be 2:1 is also a question where it wasn't earlier. But Sidharth Yadav, how will you assuage the fears that some may have, naturally would have and legitimately will have on the neutrality of the Election Commission? How will you assuage those fears and doubts?
Shivani, we are all concerned about the legitimate fears. Those legitimate fears are going to be addressed on all constitutional forums of our country. The discussion is happening on your television today. Similar public discussions will happen, but there is no remedy for the illegitimate fears. If someone wants to build an illegitimate fear, does not want to participate in when the bill is actually being presented and passed, do not want to present any opinion because actually they know that there is nothing to oppose in it.
No, but why
and
not
they,
bring in
and
the
they want to
neutral
just
body
create a
CJI
propaganda.
into it?
There is no solution that we have
Okay,
for that.
I'll leave it
But
at that. I've run out of time.
The people
It
of
is,
the country
of
know.
course, very important that the Election Commission type body in India is not brought into party politics and its stature is not brought down so that people lose faith in it. That's the fundamental issue here.